for Europe needs to change the narrative on AI, from this we're perpetually behind and underfunded to look at this panel. We have a full lineup from groundbreaking research, actually, to applications both in industrials, the moonshots, then we have an application over there, and then also we have the funders. So we're going to discuss end-to-end how Europe can and must change narrative. In 2026 is our year. And the theme of this panel is a little confidence grounded in capability. So maybe we start with that. And maybe, Mirko, we start with you in terms of like, what's your sense, like this year, what are we confident about in Europe in AI before we then actually dive a bit deeper in the panel? I'll ask all of you this question and then we go a level deeper on this.
We can be extremely confident in Europe because all technology development, and this includes AI, is always happening in S-curves. And the current developments are amazing, and this is the first S-curve of AI. But we in Europe have so much great talent that I'm super optimistic, and I guess this is your question, where does the optimism come from, that we have the talent to look forward to the next S-curve and to find and monetize and develop it.
Yeah. And you're doing something very exciting I'll ask you about as we go through this panel, because I think this is really something worth hearing for the room. There's an exciting call for action here to some very exciting talent. I don't know if we can still call it that way, Andreas, because you're already in it fully. What are you excited about for AI in Europe right now?
I think I'm extremely excited about what we call visual intelligence, which I deeply believe will be the next wave of transformative AI. We currently see language modeling with all the coding that's currently done, and that's making huge waves, and I think rightfully so. But I think the next step in AI will be machines that have a better physical understanding of the world. And if you ask yourself how you get this or get there, we can start with us humans. If we think about how we learn in a way a physical understanding of the world, the first thing every human does is seeing and listening. And I think that's a pretty good kind of proxy for the potential of what we call visual intelligence, which are models that are video models, which have a grounding in the physical world. Current video models are more renderers. They can create high-resolution videos already with audio as well. But what they lack is a memory, a kind of, we call it state sometimes, a consistency in an environment. So when I would simulate myself walking out of this room and going in the room again, I wouldn't look at the same audience. There's no consistency in the model currently. And I think that's what we need to reach, and that's what world modeling is about. I think this will be the next wave, and especially in Europe, we have very strong labs. We have Black Forest Labs, our company. But we also have Spatial here in Munich, for instance, yes. A relatively new company. Hearing rumors about Jan LeCun founding a very nice startup in Paris. And I think language modeling is really only the first step. The next wave will come through visual AI, and there I'm very optimistic for Europe.
Super. Lots to unpack on visual AI. Very exciting to hear about that actually during the panel. Peter, I know you are also thinking quite a bit about the next frontier in AI and how to bring it to the physical world. What are you most excited about for 2026 before we dive a little deeper?
Yeah, we're just coming from CES, and the big topic there was physical AI. And physical AI is meaning bringing AI not just in any sort of applications to glue you more to the screen and to do social media, but it really is a question about how do we change everyday's life when it comes down to production, when it comes to traffic, when it comes down to buildings and energy and everything. And we believe that 2026 is going to be the year where we're going to see massive productivity improvements that are tangible, and it's going to further accelerate investments into AI.
Super. Thank you for that. And Sebastian, I know in the pre-discussion you also talked about this in terms of what does get better and by how much. So specifically, what are you investing in? So what are you excited about the most for this year?
I think what we see is that AI has started to enter every industry, every company, and starting to provide solutions for that. And we see a lot of value and a lot of entrepreneurs building companies in vertical applications. And I think that is something where, especially in Europe, there's a good place to be, because there is a strong heritage in industries, in manufacturing, in automotive, and all sorts of other industries. And if you can prove that we can actually get AI to work to increase productivity or to increase processes in those traditional industries, that is a very strong combination. And we do have the talent. We have people that come from those industries, that have that domain expertise, and now use AI to do something better. And that's, at least from an investment opportunity, is very exciting because there's many, many entrepreneurs out there who do exactly that.
Super. Last but not least, Antonio, you see the very front end, actually, from the research side. What are you the most excited about for 2026 AI?
So for me, actually, the most exciting aspect at the moment is that I really have the impression, and I think this is also a grounded impression, that we have picked up speed, actually.
Yeah.
I think this is something, so maybe a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, I had really the feeling that there was a broad impression in Europe, also in Germany, that we are somehow in a lost race. I think at that time I already thought this is complete nonsense, but anyway, I had the impression people were believing this, and within the course of a year, somehow we managed in Europe to change this kind of narrative. I think I see much more hope and much more energy in Germany, but also in Europe. We heard actually Robert Viola in this respect, much more energy to basically take the chances that we have, and move forward. And this was different 18 months ago.
It absolutely was. I think the whole narrative has changed a lot. And I think
I'm super excited about that.
It needs everyone, I think, on this chain to actually move this forward. And at the very front end of the chain, we're just talking about timing. Mirko, you want to share a few thoughts what you're right now doing at SPRIND on this? How does Europe, can Europe be actually bold, as we've heard, and then patient at the same time? And how are you helping with this, with your Moonshot initiative right now? Tell us in the room, because I think there's a bit of an exciting pitch at the back end of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, I really love the energy here on the panel because we have a lot of optimism, and not just naive optimism. We at the Federal Agency for Breakthrough Innovation here in Germany have a motto that says, pessimism is a waste of time. And if you just listen at the multiple dimensions here, why there is well-grounded optimism that AI can leapfrog in Europe, we just heard it. We at SPRIND have a view that says, okay, infrastructure and therefore frontier foundation models is a very important baseline on which we need to build on in 2 or 3 years. And admittedly, this is in the age of AI an eternity, 2 or 3 years. But someone needs to start that, and what we are currently doing with Next Frontier AI is that we are saying we are doing a so-called challenge. For those who don't know the SPRINT challenges, think about DARPA-style challenges, think about Olympic Games for AI builders, think about Shark Tank. On July 1st, we will invest 125 million euro in 10 teams who dare to think about the next frontier. We heard, for example, a very interesting view on where the next frontier might be. So today's frontier is not where we will be in 2 years. When we had the previous discussion, you said, oh my gosh, 2 years? Your company was not even founded 2 years ago. So what we are doing here is a long-term leapfrog moonshot on the next S-curve. But while we are doing that with some great teams, we also need to ensure, and this is what we heard here in this discussion, that what are we doing until then? What can we do today? And that's obviously also extremely important.
Extremely. I love that, and I think this is exactly the kind of vision we need. And also, then you said before in the pre-discussion, also you run it a bit like Shark Tank. You probably need a big media partner for that, so it gets a lot of visibility actually and a lot of excitement and buzz, because that's also what's needed around Europe.
We need as much attention and activation as possible, obviously.
Obviously, I did want to make sure we hear that point. And Antonio, you're also working with cutting-edge researchers, so from the moonshot to the research. What's your take on this? So, what would it take to scale faster before we get to somebody who actually make it scale?
I think the important aspect here. So one is the research. I think in terms of, this has been mentioned, in terms of talents, we are doing fine in Europe. Of course, this can also be a little bit more attractive and so on, but I think in terms of research output, for example, regarding the visual models, we are absolutely top, but also in other areas, the transformer architecture, the original paper, there were Germans on the paper. So there is this output. We struggle a little bit in scaling actually also the engineering aspects of large models. This is something, I think these skills are needed in Europe. We want to make sure that actually these talents, they can basically live their lives here, actually, that they can learn actually the engineering here in Europe, in Germany, and not elsewhere in the world. And we need to provide this kind of infrastructure. But I'm very optimistic that we are on an excellent path, actually, to provide these possibilities to the actual and also next generation of AI researchers.
Fantastic. Peter, I know you at Siemens, both in terms of scale, since we're talking about the question from technology to scale, you think about this quite a lot. As a chief technologist, you also have research under you, the AI agenda. So how do you think about this? How do we get this to scale? What are the unlocks? What are you working on in that dimension?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what Mirko said, that is, we should not be naive, but we also should not think about that the race is lost. As a matter of fact, we talked about the transformer technology, 5 years old, yes. But this is a relatively new technology, and we talked about the S-curve, and there's lots of value to be unpacked. We're just seeing the beginning. Also, same with the internet. If you think about it, it took us now 25 years, but then this is where we are today. And think about it the same way. So if you think in longer cycles, there will be a massive transformation in the real world. And this is where we think about industries. So whenever you think about how we produce, for example, food and beverage, how we produce cars, how we live in buildings, all of this will be driven by AI. So as an example, in this building, probably the biggest energy cost is going to be today energy, because we sit here, a lot of cooling, otherwise it's uncomfortable. Now, these things tend to be very, very inefficient, and AI can learn with you, and that actually autonomously makes the set points to say, this should be actually right now, the meeting room is filled, and so now I need to actually activate this. And we believe you can cut costs by 30% just by using AI and learning. And as we're sitting here, in industry, a typical factory creates 100 terabytes of data. That data is today unused. And what we're saying, what if we could make this planet such that all the resource waste goes away, and that we can produce, develop and produce new ideas, products, much faster. So we think that with AI, we can cut development times, for example, in cars, down to 2 years, simply because of using AI in the design processes, all the way down to the production. And we just barely got started, because we know today 80% of that data in industry today is locked somewhere, and somebody has to take it. And we believe here in Europe, we have one of the strongest installed base in the world, other than in China, where you have a huge manufacturing base. And getting that data out of it, combining it with a leading edge model, and then deploying it, and don't forget the deployment is the key, together in a trustful way. And we heard about it earlier, yes. How important trust that is. And we hold all the strings. So that's why I'm absolutely confident we in Europe, we can and we have and we will lead in industrial AI.
Fantastic. Talk about 5 years and efficiencies and how far we've come. Would you, as a founder and builder, echo that, Andreas?
What exactly, sorry?
As Europe, so we were just saying 5 years ago, we wouldn't have thought what's possible today and all the richness and how Europe's position has changed from an industry perspective. How do you see that as a founder? Would you agree?
I think principally, yes. The level of development and the progress is just insane. And yeah, I mean, Mirko already mentioned it. When I think back 3 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined having a company sometime, right? And now here I am. I cannot predict how it is in 3 years, but I think that the problems that are worked on at Siemens, for instance, are really, really valuable problems, and absolutely agree that this is super important.
Fantastic. What you probably also need as a founder is, of course, then capital. Your perspective again, Sebastian, on this. What has changed in the European investing landscape from depressed to ambitious to fast to moonshots? What's different?
Yeah, I think that the past years, and it started like two years ago when ChatGPT became visible on the horizon and public as well, like everyone was looking at the US and everyone was comparing to the US. And it almost seemed like, Europe is sitting there like the rabbit in front of the snake and being feared of moving and progressing, and like, oh my God, it's so great what the US did, and look at us a company and all this funding and all this money getting there. And so it was almost like lame ducks. And I think that has changed. Like if you look at OpenAI, there was like $70 billion invested in that company, which is a huge amount. Now you compare it to Mistral from France, which is the front runner in LLMs in Europe, there were $3 billion invested. Now, is there a 20 times difference in quality in what they're able to do? No, there isn't. So it shows that even if you may think you're behind, there's a way to catch up, and there's ways to even get better, and even take what's been done before and iterate on it, and maybe come out with something even more efficient. DeepSeek is another example. That all of a sudden there's a player appearing with relatively modest funding coming up with a great model. And I think that has changed, that people no longer think like, okay, the race is over, US gonna dominate again, maybe China, but probably US. Same like in the internet, couple of big companies, and we can't do anything about it, and that has changed. So there's more investment flowing into the space. There's, as I said, a lot of investment in vertical AI, and that all creates a new dynamic, a positive dynamic, which I think is great.
Maybe if I can
Please. I mean, I would love for you guys to
add to
build on
that.
each other.
The efficiency aspect is currently a bit underestimated, but it will get extremely important in the future, because I can get to better performance for foundation models. Just talking about my favorite topic, obviously, but I can get to much better performance by just scaling, and that's in a way, from a research perspective, the naive way of doing it, and that's what we're actually seeing a lot happening at the large labs in the US, because they have the resources, and it's just the fastest way to get there. But if you think about how we actually can, from an entrepreneur's perspective, how can we build a sustainable business model with this, and a kind of a profitable business model, that's a whole other discussion, right? Where no one is currently looking at, but it will become at some point in the future very important. And I think that's at the core of what Black Forest Labs is doing, building much more efficient models. We're actually today,
maybe you say a couple of sentences like what you're actually doing.
Oh yeah, maybe that's good to get some context if people don't know us. We are building visual AI foundation models, image generation models, and image editing models. In the future, video and generation and editing models. And we've had a classic research curriculum. The entire founding team is grounded in research. We've done a bunch of research on diffusion modeling very early on. We've pretty much influenced the field. And now we're taking this to the business in a way, because it creates real business impact. Looking at marketing, for instance, with image generation and editing, we just read a study that marketing content that is AI generated is performing 19% better than real content, which is, I think, shows a bit the potential in terms of productivity that we have. But our research, coming back to the research background that we have, was always focusing on doing efficient visual models, because visual data is really high dimensional, and you need to compress it in order to train machines efficiently to learn it, right? And there, I think we made huge leaps in research before we started Black Forest Labs, and that's a very important aspect. And I think there also Europe has very strong arguments to be a leader in this, all of this efficient foundation models.
And you and your company are a role model for what we want to achieve with Next Frontier AI. In 2 years, you created a more efficient and highly competitive model. And the big challenge that currently the state-of-the-art leaders from the US have, they are data hungry as hell, compute hungry as hell, energy hungry as hell. And we can see here one example, but this is also what Next Frontier AI will achieve. Find more examples where we in Europe can play on these strengths, also what you said. Generating 100 terabyte of data, was it per day? Or
Per hour.
Per hour, 100 terabyte of industrial data per hour. Look at that. If we had a very efficient frontier model made in Europe that is capable of industrializing this, this would also be one of these leapfrogs we are talking about here.
And then if you take together what Roberto was talking about, the AI factories, where we train these models, and then the inferencing actually most likely will happen, at least in industry, on site because of latency reasons and security reasons and so on. And with that, you really can build a different infrastructure, so to say. So don't be confused always to say everything has to run in a hyperscale environment. Actually, it does not. It has to be trained there. But then the inferencing and the everyday workload, this is the GPU conversation that we always have, can happening actually very decentrally.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so, and something maybe to add is actually that we will see, when we talk about AI models, we see these, of course, these very large general purpose AI models that are out there and that do fascinating things, you know. But the economic impact will very likely come from much more specialized models, you know, industrial models in a certain area, in material design, specialized models again. So, and these models need to be specially trained, of course. We need the infrastructure for that, but they are not as large, actually, as these enormous scaled-up general-purpose models. And of course, I understand, actually, the big tech companies in the US, they have the money. You mentioned this, you know. And of course, they're also trying to move closer, actually, to general AI, yes? To AI that you can plug into any task somewhere, you know, and it magically does the job, you know. I think we are pretty far away from that, you know. We are not so far away from these specialized models, you know. They are at our doorsteps, you know, and we can work on them, you know. These kind of very general AI models, you know, they are much further away, you know. If we look at the broad range, actually, of tasks that humans do, you know. So there is still, for quite some time, you know, AI models will remain highly specialized and powerful tools that are used actually in certain settings, you know. And I think in Europe we are super well actually set up actually to work because we have this full expertise actually across the board of manufacturing and so on. You know?
Please,
maybe share another perspective on this. I principally agree that this is where you currently can deliver a lot of value, specialized models, but we should not forget looking 5 years into the future. I cannot predict how it will be, but these at some point, these general purpose models will be extremely powerful. And I think where we've not been great in Europe in the past 50 years is looking kind of a bit more widely into the future and not only looking at our applications that we currently have, but thinking a bit out of context and thinking a bit broader. And I think that's why we've also not seen the potential in the internet. Like the internet was invented in Europe, actually. That's interesting, right? But who monetized it? Not European companies. Yeah. But it originated from here. So I think sometimes we need to broaden our scope and also think a bit further into the future to make sure we have the infrastructure of tomorrow. Because currently, I totally agree, specialized models are important. But I would say in 5 years' time, if you have much more general foundation models, you could probably very easily derive, just by doing a distillation or something, now it gets technical, but by doing some size reductions for models, you could actually derive a very strong specialized model from a general purpose model. And you could do this for every kind of different application, right?
This is why to answer on that one, or add on to that one, I agree. I mean, the development speed has been so incredible. You don't know where in 5 or 10 years, like one model could do it all. But I think one aspect that Peter mentioned is the data. And there's this huge data pool within the companies. And especially in an industrial vertical AI, those companies are extremely sensitive that the data that they give into a model is not being shared outside the company. So the last that they would want to have is that, I say, ChatGPT starts training their models on hundreds of industrial players and builds a model on top of that. And that's why I think, especially in an industrial context, for quite some while, it will be super important that you have those specialized solutions that not only train on that specific data, but that keep the data safe, that comply with all the GDPR, whatever requirements they have, that have all the access rights granted in the right way, which is important in industrial context. And I think that is a huge strength for vertical specialized companies, they can build exactly that solution for that specific use case, taking care of all these issues.
I'd love to hear both of you, actually, like Peter and Mirko, because you were like violently nodding, but I think also to add, it's a very European strength. No, I think it's an angle to this, because we're talking about it in a European context, in terms of like, what's trust, like what do you trust into, and like how do you actually collaborate in that realm, and I think that could be really a card that can be played heavier, but would love a response from both of you.
Yeah, totally. I think this is not even a contradiction, because what you said is, and I totally agree, because we also say at Next Frontier AI, at the initiative that SPRIND is doing, we need to invest in this future broad infrastructure, period. We missed some of the bandwagons in past. It's a brave endeavor, it's a moonshot, we need to invest. But we cannot wait until this investment might play out in 2, 3, 4 years. We need to do something now. And what you said is just feasible right now. Smaller models, industrialized models, models for use cases that have a boundary versus the AGI. And therefore, this is, in my opinion, not even a contradiction. I guess Europe got this wake-up call now for several reasons. And we now need to move on in all these different multifaceted paths. Infrastructure, moonshots, and today's applications. And that's a rather big endeavor, I guess.
Super.
And I keep it very short. In the end, if you think about most of AI startups, they're losing money. Even very large ones are losing money. And what that means is there's a significant expectation as with regard to the returns that are going to come. And so it still remains to be seen of how the general model's gonna make that work. I think it's easier on the vertical side, because on the vertical specific models, you go in there and you say, you know, this is where sometimes I take a very horizontal model, a general model, and then I apply it to the specific space, let's say, design in automotive, and then you really think about how can I accelerate that. And if you can really measure that value, you can price for it, and then that way it becomes sustainable. So I think it takes both in order to make it work. But in the end, it's all about the productivity and the value that we're going to see, and that race is still not entirely clear. So in the next few years, we're going to see how we're going to monetize it.
Fantastic. I have a final question to all of you, so I'll ask it, you think about it, and then we just like close it that way. With that kind of like optimism, pragmatism, but then also grounded in capability, as we just opened the panel, what's the biggest opportunity? What does Europe have to do in the next 12, maybe 24 months to materially change the trajectory of the continent on AI? If that's the one thing, what would it be from your perspective, Sebastian?
I, of course, take on the VC startup head. I think create a European environment that helps companies to scale quickly across Europe, which is still quite complex to do on the one hand side, and on the other hand side, create an environment where both public and private investors are encouraged and incentivized to invest in those growth companies to speed up development.
Super, thank you. Antonio?
Yeah, so I think I come back to actually my initial statement. I think we should keep actually the speed level high. So this is very important. I very much hope that our path towards an infrastructure that we can use for all these things that we mentioned, that we integrate this nicely into a full ecosystem. So that it's not only the hardware, you know, it's all these kind of different stakeholders that we have. From
you are the ecosystem. Look at this.
We are all
Roberto,
representatives. They all need to be able to access and make use of that infrastructure. I'm confident this is possible, but we shouldn't lose that out of focus. And then I think we have the fantastic, and then of course I'm a researcher, you know, we have the fantastic opportunity at the moment in this wild world to build up a very attractive infrastructure for the talent of the next AI generation that comes from all over the world to Europe, actually, to study the next generation of AI models.
Super. Peter?
I'd say unlock the 80% of data with confidence and speed. That's what we have to do. And this year, we have to prove that actually it does work. And my big wish for next year, as we hear, is that we have 2 or 3 industries that really demonstrate of how industrial AI has helped them to become faster, more efficient, and more sustainable.
Super. We just heard that, no? The industries, autonomous driving, industrial AI, healthcare. I think we have a match already in January, so let's go. Mirko?
keep the momentum high, embrace this technology. You know, Europe tends to be very critical from time to time. I guess not this room, but in general. So this is also a mindset question. Dare to dream big and to be bold, and then do the bold thing and the things that need to happen right now in parallel, and I guess we're done.
Fantastic. Last but not least, Andreas.
Two things. First, I think I obviously, out of self-interest, I want Europe to be the leader in visual intelligence, in visual foundation models. And as I already said, I think we're very well equipped to be that. But I want Europe to be the recognized leader. And the second thing is, I want us to not only import high or deep technology and AI technology from other parts of the continent, and we're just starting to export it, to bringing it to other parts of the world, to China, to the US, so they consume our foundation models. I think that's, and we can do this, and we will do this.
I love it. I love the ambition. What a beautiful way to close this, like from here to the world. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Bravo to the panel.